G'day, I'm Owen, and you've joined this week's edition of the Pub Test, where we are continuing our Jack the Ripper suspect series. And in this one, we are looking at the interesting case of Robert Stephenson. And I was holding off doing this one for quite some time because I was trying to get his name fit into that thumbnail, which wasn't all that easy. Well, actually, no, in all seriousness, he is a polarizing figure in Ripper circles. So who was he and how does he fit in to the Jack the Ripper saga? Well, Robert was born in 1841 and he was born into middle class. So he was doing okay for himself. He wasn't overly struggling, and he got to study chemistry over in Munich and then also other medical studies. Went back to Paris where he met Lord Lytton's son. Now, Lord Lytton had written a book, Zenoni. And that book covered a few interesting topics. It was a fiction novel, but based around some black magic style, living forever, immortality, or elixir of youth, and things like that. And that fascinated Robert. And he started to really get interested in that. And we don't know exactly when, but he claims that he traveled the world looking for that sort of knowledge. He went to Africa. He went to South America, where some of these tribes back then were definitely involved in the black magic, and to other places in the world. At some point, he returns to England, and he's still a young bloke. So he's getting involved with some women of the night, one particular woman of the night, it's said. And he's getting a bit of gambling happening and runs up a fair debt. And his father says, well, that won't do, son. So you got two choices. Get kneecapped by these blokes that want their money, or give up that woman, you set yourself up right, and I'll look after that bit of debt. And that's the option that he chose. Exactly the arrangement that was in place, I'm not sure, but there have been some books written on this person. One author has written 3 books and another bloke's written 1. And so if you really need extra information, I'd suggest you go check them out. Yet he got work at a customs office, so he's now moved into the public service. And something weird happened at that customs office and he got shot in the leg. But he recovers from that, but it would seem that he no longer had the same drive to turn up for work. So he got pulled before a disciplinary board and sacked for just not turning up. So then he decides to move to London. But he had to change his name because he didn't want people to know that he was a sacked public servant. So he takes on the name Roslin D. Onston. So he puts a little apostrophe thing in front of the Donston and changes it to that. But I'm going to keep calling him Robert. Now, during this time in London, he does get married. And there's debate about what happens here to his wife, because by the time 1888 comes around, she's no longer on the scene. But we'll get back to that later. Following 1888, he has a few more interactions with people. We would say he's not given the best reputation by them. They're saying he's a bit quirky, bit out there, very strange bloke. But in 1916, he does pass away. But how does he fit in to the Jack the Ripper saga? Well, interestingly, most of what we know about him happens because of the Whitechapel crimes. Yes, he was in London during that, but also he was in a specific part. He was in Whitechapel, in the hospital. And Polly Nichols' body was found 150 yards or 120 meters from the hospital. And he was in that hospital for the entire duration of those 5 crimes. Now, he got very interested in these crimes. So when he saw a doctor, Dr. Davies, show how someone could get immobilized before the Ripper surgeries could take place. And that got Robert very interested. And he found a bloke, Mr. Marsh, who was a salesman, but also an amateur detective. And so, however they met, I don't know, but he starts talking to Mr. Marsh and says, I think this doctor is Jack the Ripper. He's shown how he's done it. And so Mr. Marsh says, let me hear it. Give me the story. So he does. And then Mr. Marsh goes, you know what? That Robert bloke is as sketchy as all get out. So he goes to the police and says, you need to check out this Robert Stephenson. He's the Ripper. Guarantee it. He knows way too much information about how these crimes are committed. So the police bring him in, or at least go and speak to him. And it was Inspector Roots who was the one discussing this with Robert. Anyway, Inspector Roots walks away, says, look, he's not the Ripper, but he's actually a very intelligent guy. Knows his stuff as well. And that's all that came of it. Yet, Robert wasn't satisfied with that. So he wrote to the papers as well, explaining his theories on the crimes, which included why they were being done. Because of this arcane arts, the occult. Saying these were ritual crimes. And the body parts being removed were being used for black magic purposes. Because remember, he studied all these things. Well, what's of interest here is that, yes, he was in that hospital for back pain. Now, you can easily fake pain because there's no test for that at all. They basically have to rely on your judgment. So was he there to use the hospital as a home base to go out and perform these crimes himself? Because what's of note, and it's been said, and one person who wrote a book actually paced out the steps from each victim where they were found and noted that they formed a particular occult cross. So whoever did this was definitely doing it with those sorts of practices in mind. And yes, in later life, people that knew him said that he was not just quirky but scary. He could be capable of murdering other people. And the suggestion that his first wife may have been the one that was murdered first during the 1880s, because she'd never really been heard of since. So did Robert perform these crimes? Did he go out of the hospital, sneak back in, and no one was any wiser? Yes, because he knew a lot of detail about the crime. He also understood the dark arts that it would seem that these crimes centered around. Well, there are some dissenting viewpoints to look at. Firstly, the notion that he studied these dark arts around the world, we are relying on him for that information. There is no proof that that happened at all. The thought of his wife being murdered, there is evidence to say that she died actually 2 years later, and they weren't together, but she just died of natural causes. But it is stated also that it could have been a person with the same name. So there's no real knowledge of what happened to his wife. So that is still a question mark as regards his candidacy here in the Jack the Ripper suspect list. It's been stated only recently in the 2000s, around 2011, that there's no way anyone could have snuck out of that Whitechapel hospital. Because they actually state that the crimes were all committed on the weekend when the hospital staffing levels were low. And that's what allowed him to get out. And that's why the crimes were committed at the times they were done. Yet, people are saying that was not the case. There's no way anyone could have got in or out of that hospital because you got no visitors, patients couldn't be admitted, certainly no one could get out. Yet I question that myself. I would say that it would have been possible for someone, if you really wanted to get out and get back in. But the timing of a couple of these crimes, I will admit, that would have made it difficult for him to commit them, even if he was that close being in the hospital. Some people would say, well, why would you bring it up if you were committing these crimes? Why would you draw attention to yourself? Wouldn't make any sense. And yet, as we know, that's not always the case. Even in this series, we've seen people who have drawn attention to crimes that they did do, and they're being convicted for them. Dr. Cream is the most classic example. So that alone wouldn't necessarily rule someone out. In fact, it may lend itself to suggest that, this knowledge of the crimes that he was showing was a bit of goading of the police, pushing them along, saying, look how smart I am. He is definitely an interesting suspect, but what do you think? Do you think Robert Stephenson was Jack the Ripper? Well, let us know down in comments. I'm very interested to know what you think of this one. And just letting you know also, as we move forward in this series, I was going to be doing all the suspects before revealing what I thought of this whole saga. But I'm going to change it up a little bit. I've got 2 more videos to go before I will say what I really believe as regards Jack the Ripper. The series will then still continue because you'll be surprised how many more suspects there are to go. And in some of your comments, you're adding to that list, so thank you very much. But we've got a lot still to go through, but I thought it would be time to release my thoughts as if I'm at the pub explaining what I believe is the true solution to Jack the Ripper. So make sure you look out for that one as it's coming up in a few videos' time. Thank you very much for watching. It always is genuinely appreciated. Smash that subscribe button. Help this channel out. I'm Owen. You've been watching The Pub Test, and we will see you on the next one.